Florida State lands a Nebraska transfer.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. The Noles add another key piece to their 2025 roster. They have gotten Stefon Thompson from Nebraska. If you remember now, that is a guy that obviously played with Tony White. Really important pickup. I've talked about it multiple times in this past week here at Locked On Seminoles. The Noles need experience with the new 3-3-5 defense. They need somebody that understands the play calls, the system, help some of the younger guys like Omar Graham, Blake Nicholson, and everybody else that's coming up the ranks in the back end of that defense especially, but even for the front guys too. Getting this guy is important. We're going to go over some of his stats, talk about his fit, and different ways that he can help the Noles here over the next few minutes. Let's just start with the obvious. What did he do last year for Nebraska? What's his size? What's his weight? All that fun stuff. 6'1", 240. So size is obviously not a problem. He can play, as they say, unprotected in the middle of the defense. Even if a guard is head up on him, he's going to be a little bigger than some of those 215, 220-pound linebackers that you see in college football. Also, for Thompson, he's a guy that has done it for a while. Being in Nebraska's scheme, he's going to know how to take on blocks a little bit differently when you don't have a defensive lineman, at least bump it into guys consistently. That's helpful. Statistically, he had 27 tackles, forced fumble, and he had a couple pass breakups last year as well. I believe 3. So if you're looking at him from a player that is, okay, well, he's a bigger guy, he could probably only play the run. That's not actually true. He's been able to play the pass a little bit as well. Getting your hands on the football as a pass defender, whether linebacker, safety, corner, nickel, I don't care what it is, or even defensive lineman, that's how you change games because those balls often end up being deflections to picks. So his experience there is also valid. What's really interesting about him, and I'll share my screen for those of you that are here on YouTube, and for those of you who are not, I'll read off all the stats anyway. Stefon is an interesting guy because he originally signed with Syracuse, okay? Syracuse started him as a true freshman right off the bat, which is really rare for a guy that's playing that spot. Linebacker is one of the hardest spots to play as a freshman, not only because knowing the defense and helping other guys, but the physicality. But he was able to do that. So looking back at his 2021 season, his second year there, started every game, 661 snaps. That's a guy that played a little bit of everything for him, but he was an outside linebacker primarily, or as they say, a weak side linebacker. They're very similar. Coverage grades were a little bit all over the place, but he had a couple bad weeks against Florida State, ironically, and Wake. And he also did pretty consistent the rest of the year, BC, Louisville, et cetera, towards the end of the year. And if you think about, okay, well, why is he such a good player? Why is the fit? He wasn't just a run guy. He wasn't just a pass defender. He had 7 sacks. When I saw that today, excuse me, I was a little bit surprised because most guys that are bigger like him don't get downhill to the quarterback. He's 6'1", 240. He's a thick-bodied power player. He's obviously a little twitchier than I thought. Now, doesn't mean that he's elite, but Syracuse figured out a way to use him. I'm curious to see how he will be utilized for the Noles, but the statistics were there. Continuing on, kind of looking at some of his other things to look at here. Maybe the best stat he had in 2021 was 35 stops. Now, what is a stop by PFF? Pro Football Focus defines a stop as something where a play for the offense is basically shut down at or just past the line of scrimmage. 35 in a season is pretty darn impressive. If you look at his season in 2023, 2024, he didn't play as much. Nebraska had some pretty good linebackers this past season. So this year he had 4 stops, but he only had 175 in total snaps. And the defense is completely different than what he played at Syracuse because the different type of players they had around him. No offense, Nebraska had better personnel, I think, to run this. even if it's the same scheme, it's not really. It's different. So I'm pretty sure that he's A, more athletic than I originally thought, and B, again, he's played in the system. So Florida State fans should be happy. Now, where does he specifically help the Noles? This is where it gets really interesting. You got Nicholson and Graham. Is he going to compete with them for a starting role? I would assume so. I think he's got a good chance to start and at least be a coach. You need 4 guys rotating at inside backer anyway, but maybe he's the guy that ends up being the starter because he can make the calls. Like at least early in spring ball, I would imagine Stefon will be the guy. How long it takes for the other guys to pick it up, I have no idea. That's really difficult. But as an extra point here, regardless if he's starting or not, Thompson's ability to help not just Nicholson and Graham, but the other young players that there were freshmen, a couple of redshirt freshmen coming back, guys like that, they need the depth. Florida State is not anywhere near set at inside linebacker, and they need edge help too. I'm curious to see how that's going to work out. That might be, out of all the positions, other than maybe receiver, the one that I'm most curious about. O-line takes more time, so I'm not going to be as concerned about spring ball at that spot. I know it's going to still be struggling. I need to hear more reports in fall camp. That takes much longer. But wide receiver and linebacker will be the 2 most important spots for me this spring. You could make an argument Stefon's going to be the guy that kind of helps overlook everything for the defense and gets it done for the Noles. So last thought here on him as we wrap up this pod on Stefon coming to play for Florida State. If they continuously get guys that have a fit in the defense, that know Tony White, that know what they want, and by the way, Florida State had recruited Stefon Thompson before he went to Nebraska when he left Syracuse, this is going to be a much easier transition. You can never have enough experience on your defense or offense for that matter. And to be frank, Florida State looked lost last year, even with some of their experience. So I'm hoping guys that have had success in a defense, and Nebraska certainly had some of that over the last couple of seasons, will give this team a bit of a jump start. Ward only knows Florida State's defense needs it because they had so many moments last year. Okay, they're starting to turn the corner. And then they would just shoot themselves in the foot. It was really hard to grasp. But with that being stated, thank you once again for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. And I also would like to say, please, if you would, hit that like button, hit that notification bell, and subscribe to this podcast and share it so I can get in front of other Noles fans. I truly appreciate it. Everybody have a good one. Take care.